Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday, September 15th, North Middlesex Council meeting. We do have a light agenda here this evening, but I'd call this meeting to order. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest, please pass that on to our clerk, to Jackie. Minutes from the previous meeting, any business arising, errors or omissions? Hearing none, we need a motion to pass the minutes from the September 1st meeting. Councillor Nickel and Councillor Keogh, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We don't have any delegations, so we'll go into department reports, and we're going to hear first. We have Arnie Marsman with us. And so Arnie, if you're going to start, or Jonathan, are you starting? Okay, go ahead, Jonathan. Go ahead, Arnie.
You're on mute, Arnie.
Very sorry. Good evening through the mayor to council. I'm here tonight to present our first half building report for North Middlesex building permit activity this year. And I apologize for the tardiness of the report. I intend to bring reports to council on a quarterly basis, so you see the status of how things have gone over the previous 3 months. And I suspect in about a month we will get a third quarter report. I can say that things have gone very well with your residents and local builders with respect to the use of cloud permit and generally scheduling inspections. It seems that things have gone well, both with North Middlesex and the other members of our building services agreement team. What I see from this year is very similar to what the township's seen, the municipality has seen over previous years. It's been a good start. I certainly can advise the third quarter report is going to be fairly impressive, I think you'll find, but I am available if there's any questions about what you see here tonight, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Arnie. So questions from council on the report? Councillor Hemming?
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Just one question, Arnie. Is it possible for you to just add one more column to that with the comparables to just last year? It's just kind of interesting to see that, if that's possible.
Yeah, through the mayor, I'll look into that, Councillor. It's certainly something we wanted to do this year, but just being able to put that data together, we weren't able to do that in the right time. But I'll see if I can get that into the third quarter and into the annual report for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Deputy Mayor Cornelison.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Arnie, I'm looking at the septic permits. So are they still the eco type of systems? Or are they more the traditional ones, or is it just a combination of different kinds?
Yeah, through the mayor, we see a combination right now. Traditionally, the raised systems are a little bit easier because there's no mechanical systems for maintenance other than pumping out the septic tank and cleaning the filter. But we do find that the more mechanical treatment units do save space, and they are preferred in certain situations where the setback to the well is an issue or lot size is an issue. But traditionally, I think most people try to avoid those treatment units because there's a bit of an added cost over the traditional raised systems.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions? Thank you very much, Arnie, for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. Our second report is the drainage superintendent. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Hemming and Councillor Moyer, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Our next one is a drainage report, and that's 2 petitions under the Drainage Act. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Mayor, members of council, what you have in front of you is a petition to receive the petition for the Stokes drain. I think Stokes first on the agenda. The recommendation is that council receive the notice for request for drain improvement to the Stokes drain under section 78 of the Drainage Act. Any questions? I'm here to answer if anybody has anything.
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Canales.
Thank you. Jonathan, is this for the development in Elsie Craig?
That's correct. It will be for a Sabo Bluffs. Yeah, the Stokes drain, as well as the next drain that we're going to, that we've received a petition on. The Stokes goes right through the middle of the development right now.
Okay.
And the Cameron Thurwell is just on the southern edge of it. But yes.
Okay, thank you.
The Cameron Thurwell, that's the open one, right? That
Correct.
one's Open. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? No questions. We have a recommendation in front of us. Yes, this on the Stokes drain. I'm sorry. Councillor McClinchy, Councillor Keough, all in favor? Carried.
Mayor, members of council, the recommendation that's in front of you is that the council receive the notice for request for drain improvements to the Cameron Thurwell drain under section 78 of the Drainage Act. Again, any questions? I'm here to answer.
Any questions on this drain? No questions? We're looking for someone to move the recommendation. Councillor Nickel? Councillor Hemming, all in favor? Carried. Thanks, Jonathan. Next, we have a report from the treasurer, and that's on the municipally leased facilities and the lifting financial relief measures.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So the report that you have in front of you, staff is recommending the following: that council receive staff report entitled Lifting Financial Relief Measures for Municipally Owned Facility Rentals, that staff collect the outstanding amount for Q1 and Q2 from the Friends of the Park Hill Carnegie Library, and that the invoices for Q3 for all three groups get written off. So a little bit of background for this report. So you will remember that council did approve the lifting of financial measures for these groups, where they had the option to ask for deferral for their monthly fees. So there are three local groups that currently rent municipal facilities. There's the Leisure Club, the Friends of Ye Old Town Hall, and the Carnegie Library. So what you have in front of you in the first table is just a comparison of what their lease agreements are. All three of them have a yearly rent of $1. The Leisure Club and the Friends of Ye Old Town Hall pay their actual cost of utilities, but the Friends of the Carnegie Library pay a flat fee of $200 per month. The second table indicates the total amount invoiced and the total amount paid for 2020 as well as 2021 for the three groups. So basically what's happening is the Leisure Club as well as the Ye Old Town Hall are paid in full. They have not requested any deferral, but the Friends of the Carnegie Library have requested and received deferral for their 2021 invoices. In all fairness, staff is recommending to collect Q1 and Q2 from the Carnegie Library, but for Q3 to write off the utility invoices for all three groups.
Just a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in comparing with the Parkville Leisure Club and the Old Town Hall, and that's for utilities, $200 a month, correct? For Park Hill Carnegie Library. So
Correct.
does the Old Town Hall and the Leisure Club, do you know what their utility bills are? Do they run the same thing, or do they differ?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what you see listed is what has actually been invoiced. So they are the actual costs. So the $890 that you see in the second table for the Leisure Club and Ye Old Town Hall, those were the actual amount of invoices. But the Friends of Carnegie Library, according to the agreement that we have with them, they pay a flat fee of $200 per month. That's how the agreements were.
And then with the COVID, nothing was going on.
Correct. Correct. So council is looking, staff is looking for direction from council in regards to these amounts outstanding.
Just a question, were we not going to look into the agreement with the Leisure Club and the Old Town Hall in comparison with the Carnegie Library? Why is that agreement so much different than the other ones? But we're not gonna look into that.
Through your worship, the Carnegie Library agreement is the newest agreement that we have. It's also a new tenant where the Leisure Club and Ewell Town Hall have historical arrangements with us. And I believe through the Carnegie Library agreement, it was suggested through legal that it should be a flat fee. And obviously that would have been brought to council's attention as well. There's always ways to terminate an agreement and then cycle into a new one. But that would be up to the parties, including ourselves and the Carnegie Library, to jointly exercise that. We cannot reach out to them if that's the direction from council, but this is the arrangement that we currently have with the Carnegie Library.
That's quite a big difference.
There is a substantial financial difference. Obviously, you know, friends of both the Leisure Club and the Town Hall have different footprints on what they're proposed. I'm minding that COVID threw a wrench in all three of these services or these groups. But there is a difference there. Yes.
So it stays as it is then,
Currently, the agreement is it's $200 a month flat fee,
until they reach out to us and say, can't afford it or whatever.
or unless they do a delegation. But they have requested us to defer that. And as per the previous report that came to council, we were bringing back the information for all three of these
Yeah.
groups.
Okay.
Okay, other comments, questions on this? Staff is looking for direction on what council wants to see happen with this. I mean, there's a reality that they have not been able to do anything and they had no income coming in. So, I mean, it's council's needs to give direction to staff on this as to what you wish. And so as far as the agreements, I think that's something that can be looked into, but at this time, right now, we have this in front of us. We did agree to that. If you remember, those agreements did come before us, but they didn't all come together, right? So you didn't compare apples to apples. Yeah.
Just so I'm correct in my thinking here. So what you're recommending is that we be written off, but except, where is it? The Carnegie, the one that throws me off is the Friends of the Carnegie Library. Is that to be written off as well? Am I correct in saying that? Or are you still wanting to collect rent for up to whatever? I'm not clear on that.
Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor. Basically what we're saying here, since the other two groups have already paid Q1 and Q2 to keep things fair for all three groups, we would ask that Carnegie Library pay Q1 and Q2, but that Q3 would be written off for all three groups.
Okay, but they'd still be paying quite a bit more.
They would have an outstanding amount of $1,200.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what's coming before council to decide. Just, you know, just so that's the whole point here. The council has to make this decision and give direction to us. Other comments? Crickets. What's your wish? You know, we can't just leave it sitting.
No,
Two
no.
groups have paid. Two groups have paid. If we were to
Not as
forgive,
much as they did, but that was
no,
agreement.
no, but on the agreement, but two groups did pay it. And so that's why staff want direction.
May I make a suggestion? I mean, since the agreement is the agreement, if you ask for, where is it? 800 and, or whatever it is, a total of 890 rather than 1,200. I don't know. It's just a suggestion, because that's what the other two groups had paid on top. But I know what the agreement said.
Okay, Councilor Moyer.
This is what utilities. Do we know what those utilities are? They might use more.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
Through your worship, to the treasurer, the 890 looks like the water wastewater rate is
Correct.
the old town hall and the leisure club. Are they paying for their gas separately?
I would assume
They
so.
pay
This is
the
not part
utilities.
of the agreement.
Where the friends of or the Carnegie Library, where the discrepancy might be is gas utility and hydro utility, which I believe are still in our.
We pay all the utilities at Carnegie. We're not paying all the utilities at the others. They pay their own utilities. Yeah, that's the difference.
I think what we send over as a billing function for the old town hall, the leisure club is the water wastewater component, and that it's standalone for themselves individually for the other utilities, whether that be Payable or.
I am not aware of the processing of any gas invoices for these three buildings.
Would it be possible to, until you look into like the questions that you had presented to her that.
Well, I'm through your worship, I'm getting a nod from the clerk as well too. I think it's the correct interpretation. Brandon, I'm going to put you on the spot too. Did you hear that question in terms of the utilities for? There you go.
Okay, we're getting clarification on it. He's gonna
Oh, okay,
clarify right now who's paying what.
okay.
But there is a difference in the agreement. If I remember right, and I may not, but Carnegie Library wanted to know for budgeting and for fundraising and all that, a flat fee. So that we were paying the actual utilities and they pay that set amount. So hopefully we'll get that and then
Yeah, okay.
we'll go from there.
Would we want to move on to accounts payable?
I think so. I think we'll move on to the next one until we get more. All right, so go ahead, Estelle.
Accounts payable, what you have in front of you are the expenses for the period of August 24th to September 9th, 2021. I'm opening the floor for questions.
Questions from council, Deputy Mayor Canals.
Thank you. I believe my question, I'll direct it to our CAO. If I think he may have the information I'm looking for. So Jonathan, for the southwestern brush control, roadside drain and mulching for almost $19,000, do we not have our own equipment to do that, or is it just extra work that needed to be done? It's on the very top there at the direct deposits mostly, right?
Through your worship, that is signed by, that bill or invoice is signed by Brad, so it would be above and beyond our standard services. So it would be a contracting, it'd be the lack of staffing or just a problematic area.
Okay, thank you.
I think his equipment is considerably heavier than what we have
Okay, well,
to do that as well.
Okay, that makes
You know.
sense. All right.
So we could maybe get a clarification on it if you want it. Yeah,
My apologies. I'm looking at the invoices right now and they are for skid steer mulching, which we don't have. So either it could be a steep slope or embankment that we just don't have access to. And I do know with our boom operation that sometimes, depending on not many factors, we can't get the same diameter some of these
Okay.
heavier equipment can.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment on that the ditch mowing equipment that we did authorize during budget process is not compatible to do the work that Southwest is doing. So in fact, I can see that being a contract service outside of the equipment that we have.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for our invoices? No other questions? All right, we need a motion to pay. Moved by Councillor Moyer, seconded by Councillor Nickel. All in favor? Carried. Are we ready to go on with the other? Are we ready to go back, Brandon, to that, or you still want a little more time? Can you take can you remove, nobody's around you, yeah.
It doesn't look like we have an account. Where you'll found all of these believe that they've been operating their own account provider one. Therefore, we believe that the same can be said with Andrew as well.
Okay. So they're paying their own utilities and
That, through your worship, would all be based off usage. And that would fluctuate even in COVID. Like I would imagine that they would barely have the furnace turned on during the winter to make sure the pipes are not freezing over, where if there was an active, like it usually is, you would be turning up the heat.
all right, so Councillor Moyer.
But we are talking about giving them relief for the third and fourth quarter. Is that correct?
I only covered third quarter,
Third
but
quarter.
if council's wish is to write off the fourth quarter as well, that would be a decision made by
Okay, so you
council.
just third.
Councillor Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just make a comment that by what's in front of us, these lease agreements are due in June 2022. And I think maybe at that time we should maybe have something pinned down a little more equitable amongst all three. So I think at this time, if we write off Q3 and
So
for
you're
relief.
saying, you're agreeing with the recommendation?
I am,
That they pay one, first and second quarter,
yes.
that's outstanding, and then we give relief for third quarter?
For Q3, and I think we'll just maybe be a little bit more, have more insight on this going into June 2022 when we negotiate new leases.
So are you moving that recommendation?
I'm moving.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Moyer? More discussion on this? No? In favor? In favor? All carried. Thanks, Estelle.
Thank you.
Committee reports. Anything you want to add to the Lake Huron? Okay. ABCA?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rob. I looked at the agenda prior to coming in tonight, and I won't be able to attend the meeting tomorrow, as you know. But I did notice, and I was talking with our CEO on that there's going to be discussion on agreements with municipalities due in 2023. So I intend to be phoning the general manager of Saba Bayfield possibly Friday morning to get some additional clarification on what the discussion entails and what the details of that issue is.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions for the deputy mayor? No questions? Blue Water? Nothing there. EDAC? Economic Development, nothing there. Local School Advisory?
We've postponed our meeting that was due tomorrow, was supposed to be tomorrow, and we are postponing that until October.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Rob.
Deputy Mayor Canales.
I just wanted to thought maybe we should maybe have a discussion on the value of this committee going forward. You know, because I don't know, like in certainly protecting our schools, I think it certainly has value, but the public doesn't seem to be participating to the extent that we had hoped that they would. Other than council and staff and trustees, we have very limited participation. So I just thought I'd throw that out for discussion to see what the other members of the committee are thinking.
Okay. Joan?
I agree. Very, very little is coming to the table. We have a very small group. We have a lot of discussion, but you're right, it's coming from the trustees at most times. With the new subdivisions going in the area, I mean, we're obviously hoping to see some changes in our schools. But at this time, nothing can be done about Strathroy still taking on the high school students. Medway has stopped taking on students, but Strathroy has not. So at this point, I agree, the committee is really not succeeding in, I think, doing enough. I'm wondering about
At this time, like you're,
yeah, I'm wondering about maybe waiting until some progress is made with the new buildings and then readdressing that committee.
okay, I'd like to, Doreen, what do you think, Doreen? Just turn there. Oh,
It's. Oh, turn it on.
it's okay. Go ahead.
So no, I agree too, because we're not going anywhere.
At this time, well, right now it seems to be off the radar. Is that what you're, like the
Yeah.
schools are kind of off the radar right now? COVID might have something to do with that as well at the present time, but
I think COVID had some to do with it, but I think even before COVID, we were seeing a lack of interest from the general public. I mean, we couldn't even get the principals of the schools to come out. So that sort of tells me that there's just not a huge interest. I mean, we do have some of the general public, but not near enough.
Jackie, did you want to speak on that?
If I may, I think as staff, I really caution on how that approach is taken. I think we do have some very dedicated parents that have attended that meeting, and our school trustees, we are so fortunate to have that participation by our school trustees and receiving that information. I agree with what you're saying. I think maybe there's a different approach that could be looked at. And I think we kind of had talked about the intertwining of EDAC and LSAC. And there's a lot of common areas that maybe, you know, there's some thought to put into maybe a different committee and maybe some items on the agenda that may be reflective of LSAC issues, that type of thing. But I have to say I'm a little bit little perplexed, I guess. I'm just trying to think of the right words, because I was just kind of caught off guard with the conversation. I presume you were going to carry on with your October meeting to talk to the committee about this and just kind of get a feel from our trustees and kind of if they feel there is still benefit in helping with our rural schools, or is through the county. I mean, our deputy mayor does sit on an active rural that's looking into those kind of issues as well. So, I mean, again, it's just a staff perspective. I just,
And that's why we're
sorry, I'm
having
just
this
trying to collect my
conversation.
thoughts with that, but
I feel we
do.
definitely need to go on with the October meeting. And I think we need to talk to our trustees, because I know that they really enjoy sitting with us, talking with us, giving us insight and getting back from us very unfortunately little insight as to what's going on in the schools. I think that the EDAC committee, that maybe we should be looking at working with them on this committee, like maybe joining the two committees in the future. But I think in October, we need to make sure that anybody that sits on that committee has a voice and get their opinions. But I think it's something that we need to consider and set up on the agenda.
And I agree, you got to take it to the committee, because you may only be getting a few parents, but they may be very passionate about the committee. Councillor Moyer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, as a past member of that committee, I want to echo Jackie's sentiments. I think it's important that we keep those lines of communications open with the board. I mean, we had basically no communications 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and it's very good now. And I think Brandon can speak to this. At our last rec meeting, the high school was very, very open to working with the rec committee and going back and forth with municipalities. So I think that's probably part of the work from this committee as well. So, I mean, they're talking about facilities usage between each other and everything. So I think it's,
Okay,
I
so-
feel it'd be important to keep that,
So,
keep that in some form anyways, whether it's this committee or whoever.
and I was just going to say, that is something I think to take to that committee and see if they would like changes to it or to, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Rupp. But however, moving forward, should this committee continue, I will have to resign from the committee due to the conflict I have with housing.
Yeah.
Because this committee meets on the third Thursday of every month, which is in direct conflict with the housing committee, which I certainly want to attend. So if this moves forward, we have to appoint someone else.
Okay. All right, thank you. Jonathan, go ahead.
If I may, your worship, what I'm hearing is that I think at some point or other, some of the committees were a reaction state. Now we're evolving into a proactive state. We need to find the tabled agendas of these committees and the invested interest to the organization, the community, and the trickle-down effect that it has. If I was afforded the latitude, I think we report to council in terms of some of these outliners. And again, I would encourage you to speak to the committees in the future. That maybe something by year's end should be considered here in correlation with hopefully a future visioning session, because I think really what we're asking ourselves is what's the initiatives, what are the agenda items, and what can we do to marry some of the efforts that we have across. And that's a good thing to happen, that we're having economic development and the rec committee and the school advisor committee all thinking the same wavelength. Let's just put them together and figure out. Doesn't have to be one big committee group, but let's put the agenda items in the terms of reference and try to see if we can match correlation there.
Okay. So going forward, bring that to the committee, to the school advisory. The deputy mayor did bring up a point, and you had let me know ahead of time that it's going to conflict with the housing committee that he's on with the county, and it's an important committee that he's sitting in. And it looks like it's actually going to have some teeth in it, and you've got a new person heading it and feeling pretty good to it. So go ahead.
Well, I thought that fell apart, or is that a new reconstructed committee now?
The city brought back a community-based board. Our first meeting, I believe, was August 19th,
Yeah.
or maybe it was in July. I think it was actually July. And in August 19th, I went to my second meeting. And during that process, we interviewed for a new CEO, because Andrea McKenzie was the interim CEO. And in the interview process, we did retain the services of Mr. Chisholm, who has a great deal of experience and has history and knowledge with the city of Toronto and Durham region, and he will be assuming his duties in a matter of weeks. But the city has also taken it very seriously because they've assigned Councillor Phil Squire, he is the chair, and the Deputy Mayor Josh Morgan is also on the committee. And they have both highlighted the city's commitment to housing, that things have to improve and they want to move forward to deal with the housing crisis in the city. And of course, I echo the same for the county.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Okay, that's.
so having said that, is there someone who would consider sitting on the local school advisory for the next little while at least? You know, sometimes another person into that committee adds something to the committee or changes dynamics. To somebody who'd, and if you don't want to put your hand up right now, come forward or let me know, or let Jonathan know, or Jackie know. You know, if you're interested in that, but the deputy mayor did disclose to me that he would have to step down from that committee. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the rec committee.
I was unable to attend the last meeting. I don't know if there's anything Gord or John or John.
Nothing?
No, we did have a productive meeting, but I do have to just remember what we discussed. I'll be honest. I'll come back to that.
I'll come back to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So nothing on Aqua? Okay. And the policies, we haven't met. Policy committee has evolved a little bit as well. We meet when there's when policies come forward, the committee meets to look at them. Otherwise, you know, for a while there, we were trying to catch up. Right? When we first started to do it, there was a lot.
We still have a lot of catch up to do. It's never ending. I think it's just workloads and different things, but we will be getting back on track with that.
Okay.
Mayor Ropp, I'm ready for you now.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did have a good discussion. Minor hockey has committed to quite a bit of our ice usage, and so in the men's league and the skating club as well. So looking forward to seeing some activity at the arena. It is to be determined with the COVID restrictions that are coming out as to what the guidelines are for parents being involved, dropping off participants and whatnot. So that is to come forward and be some decision to be made on that.
Okay. So, because it's not decided then yet. If
That's-
someone wants to go to the Stars game or something, can they just walk in? I know we're going to talk about this a little more with
That's
this
right.
protocol.
At the time of our meeting, nothing was concrete, and we really had
It's a
nothing
moving
to-
target
Nothing
right
to move
now.
on that. That's right.
It's a moving target. Okay. And we're going to have more discussion on that later.
Exactly.
Fire committee.
Yeah, while I'm on here, we had a short meeting last night, and it was just a more of an up-to-date. The demolition for the existing fire hall will happen before the end of October. They have moved to the former works yard, and are set up and working out of there.
Excellent. Excellent. Any questions?
I have a question for
Deputy Mayor,
for
go
the chair,
ahead.
if I may. I understand, and rightfully so, that the municipality does cover the costs of uniforms for our volunteer firefighters. Do we also cover the cost for their dress uniforms? And is that a need?
That I can't answer for you. I can certainly look into it and get back to you. I do know that and Joan can probably help me out on this, being former fire, that the dress uniforms are more for a public, whether they attend funerals, presentations, anything like that. So whether that is on the municipal's dime, I can't tell you, but I can certainly look into it and get back to you on that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I can talk to that a little bit. In the past, the Firefighters Association always bought the dress uniforms after 2 years of being in service. I was talking to our chief, questioning him about that. He informed me that it was his belief that the former chief had changed that, in that we would now be buying those dress uniforms. So I have asked the clerk if she would look into that for us to see if I went through a bunch of council stuff, I could not find it. So I asked the clerk if, just yesterday, if she could look into that. So I believe that's being looked into at this point.
And I think in fairness, I'd like to see the chief to be here for this.
Yeah.
We'll ask the chief to speak to that.
I
maybe.
can tell you from being on the fire department that it is a formal dress, so you would wear it only for presentations, funerals.
And I was
Remembrance Day.
aware too that in the past, it was the association, they fundraised and they bought the
That
uniforms.
is correct, yes.
But I think we'll ask the chief to speak on that rather than.
I'll,
By the way.
I'll send an email tomorrow and get some clarification on that for you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on the fire committee? Nothing else? All right, that's it for the committee's correspondence. ABCA 75th anniversary news release. Tomorrow. Service Ontario annual performance report. Anything on that? Nothing? Okay,
Well, I do have a question if I may.
okay, yes.
How's it doing financially? Do we know? There's no attachment.
Okay.
So this is a program progress from the ministry, not financial from our operations budget. This is how the program's working, how it's meeting its thresholds regarding the province's thresholds. So it's about the business being done there, not the financial component of that would be coming through your finance department.
I was looking forward to reading some details, but there's just nothing.
No, so this is just about the program.
Through your worship, I think what they're, you didn't get the attachments, correct? So correspondence are clustered together under the correspondence tab, not the individual tabs.
Okay.
But-
I looked at the wrong spot.
Oh, my
in-
apologies. I
getting
thought
the
you seen that.
So generally in the synopsis where credit is due, where Celeste is doing a great job, the target is 90%, and I think she is over every single target of 90%. So it's managed very well independently and firing on all cylinders when we can actually open.
Well, I do feel a little silly now. Thank you.
So
Well,
it's the
it is, but
paper
it-
clips. You want to open the paper clips.
In fairness, yeah, it's a new system and it's a little different.
So my apologies. We'll make it clear.
No problem. All right, other business. I'm gonna start that off, if I may, with wishing Brad Davies all of our best. He's leaving us, I believe Friday is his last day. And I want to wish him the best. I talked with him this morning and I think he's already busy till Christmas time. But glad he was here this week. Just like every other day, he's at work and doing this thing. And I want to wish Brad Davies the very best. He's worked here a long time and he's been a great employee and really good to work with.
And he has probably worked extra harder this week and longer hours because of Sunday night's
Everyone has.
storm and it was,
Yeah.
I have to commend everyone that out there doing such a great job.
And that was the other part. And I mentioned at a county, yesterday at the county council that kudos to all of the crews that cleaned up our North Middlesex crews, the Middlesex County crews and the hydro crews. Really, when you see how much damage there was to have the hydro on when they did was excellent. So, okay, so other business as well. The municipal recognition of September 30th, National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And Jackie, you're going to read that.
Thank you, Mayor Ropp. So as council will recall, at the last council meeting, there was discussion from council whether they would like to see a draft motion come forward in recognition of September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So in response to that, the following motion has been prepared for council consideration. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report on June 2nd, 2015, which included 94 calls to action to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. And whereas the recent discoveries of remains and unmarked graves across Canada have led to increased calls for all levels of government to address the recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. And whereas all Canadians and all orders of government have a role to play in reconciliation. And whereas recommendation number 80 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called upon the federal government in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday a national day for truth and reconciliation to ensure that the public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. And whereas the federal government has announced September 30th, 2021 as the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, or National Orange Shirt Day, and a statutory holiday. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of North Middlesex does hereby commit to recognizing September 30th, 2021 as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, or National Orange Shirt Day, and each September thereafter, by sharing the stories of residential school survivors, their families and communities when available, and by encouraging all municipal staff and council to wear orange shirts on this day.
All right, discussion on this? Deputy Mayor
I
Canales.
do have a question, and I recognize or understand that it's a federal statutory holiday. Will that apply to all municipalities and all public sectors, or?
Through your worship, you're correct. It is a federal statutory holiday. And it is really basically up to each organization to determine how they're going to honor the day. There is some people who are taking that as a holiday to the organization, but we believe that we should just recognize it in this manner tabled to you today.
Okay, so then the province has has interpreted up to the province itself.
No, they have not.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion on it? No other discussion?
Question, are we doing anything here? Because I see we all got orange shirts. Like,
Frontline staff in the municipal office we will be ordering orange shirts as well. Unfortunately, there's a high demand for orange shirts right now. So we're encouraging as many people as possible to wear orange shirts, and there'll be some social media activity that we do as well.
okay.
And so, as you can see, there's an orange shirt on the back of our chairs or on the desk in front of you. And I think if we pass this motion that we're asking councilors to wear that orange shirt on the 30th. Any other questions on it? We have a motion. What's your wish? You're moving it? Okay. Councilor McClinchy and Councilor Moyer, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So the next one is a verbal update on drafting a COVID vaccine policy. And Jonathan, you have a paper in front of you.
I was going to read that paper.
Okay,
for
sorry, you're
council's
reading.
consideration. If I could ask Brandon to join us as well, that'd be appreciated. Through the worship, this afternoon, I sent you guys some guidelines that the province had provided in terms of the regulation as it relates to the COVID-19 vaccine screening. And before I go to Brandon for an update on how this impacts the facilities, just kind of go through some landscape review. We just got this regulation update yesterday. It had been promised for a long time. So that's why it's a verbal update today. So mirroring some of the conversation that we had in the previous council, I'll be kind of seeking some general discretion from council in terms of direction in a couple of questions here. Does council wish to implement a mandatory vaccine policy affecting employees ranging from full-time, part-time, onboarding new staff, volunteers, that means our volunteer firefighters, council alike, and contractors, subject to the vaccine policy and whether it is mandatory for the organization? What would the enforcement look like? There has been some discussion on education, regular testing. The questions revolving around testing is how often. It seems to be 2 or 3 times a week. And more often than not, so that you can have the ability to go to work. It is the rapid tests, which are about $40 a piece. So the next question to that is, who's paying for that test? As an employer, or as the employee should be paying for that if they voluntarily not be vaccinated? Finally, the last question in terms of the enforcement component, and I know there are municipalities out there who are using this, is termination. And the question I would have with that, and I would seek legal advice before we fully endorse if this is direction that staff is given today, is whether this is proven with cause or without cause, because that has impacts financially to the organization. Furthermore, the effective dates, when would the effective date come into effect for our local municipality? A lot of them who are choosing this policy route of mandatory vaccination are saying the end of October. I think that's very ambitious in terms of there's going to be a drastic run to get vaccinated. So there might be supply chain issues in terms of vaccines being available. So I would suggest somewhere in November. But again, just tabling the discussion, dealing with exemptions would be something that we could hash through this as well. And Brandon will speak to that a little bit, because I believe it should marry the regulations that the province has pushed out. Finally, I think it could be interesting to push out either a voluntary or mandatory survey to staff now to see what our vaccine uptake is. There is still issues to tread lightly even in that discussion. So that would be something that we would consider to kind of even gauge if we need to go down this discussion. But I am aware that there are staff who are not vaccinated, whether they are full-time. I do know that, and I do know that volunteer firefighters, there are some that are not vaccinated as well. That being said, before I open it up for discussions, if Brandon could offer a synopsis of the impacts to the facilities, it would be appreciated. And could you turn on your mic, Brandon?
So Mayor Ropp, members of council, as of September 22nd, 2021, to enter our recreational facilities, patrons will need to be fully vaccinated. There are some exemptions to it. Exemptions being medically written doctor's notes on official letterhead indicating what the illness is that may cause them not to need the vaccination. But for the majority of our patrons, they will need to show proof of vaccination. This, we are not anticipating will go over extremely well with visitors. We will be hiring a security guard for the first little bit to work the front door. That is pretty much standard across the board of Middlesex. Thames Center's already acquired theirs. Middlesex Center's acquired theirs. Strathroy, Caradoc, and Luke and Badolph have also went through this. The reason for a security guard is they're trained to de-escalate. We feel that there will be required de-escalation. It's not fair to put a staff member in harm's way like that. There are quite a few gray areas, I would say, in this regulation. Coaches and volunteers do not need to show proof of vaccination when entering, but it doesn't state if a volunteer, let's say they're volunteering on Monday night and they come in Thursday night to watch their child play hockey, are they still a volunteer at that point? Are they still a coach when they're spectating at that point? That is not clear. OMHA is currently revising their policy. Once the government finally came out with their regulation, OMHA almost immediately said we will be sending an updated version. OMHA's current version says that anyone between the age of 12 and 18 needs to have at least one vaccination by October 15th and fully vaxxed by the end of November, I believe. Whereas the province's regulation says anyone under 18 participating in organized sport does not need to be vaccinated at all. And then when we start implementing this, third-party groups will be affected. The YMCA will be also required to have full vaccination. Anyone using our recreation centers for meetings, events, weddings, etc., will need to have proof of vaccination to enter. How this is implemented logistically is still to be decided. We are lucky on our recreation centers that we don't have a whole lot of rentals coming up, and most of them that are private rentals where if there's only 5 or 6 people entering, it's pretty easy to acquire proof of vaccination. Public events are the ones that will probably require a security guard. And yeah, it will be a whirlwind for us, but we will be preparing for the 22nd.
To your worship, if I can add just a couple of interesting points to illustrate the grayness of this policy. and I'm reading out under the exemptions: workers, contractors, repair workers, delivery workers, students, the list goes on, or others who are entering the business or organization for work purposes are not, and as not patrons are exempt. That doesn't mean we can put a policy in place. The tricky part becomes is that three-tier system: federal, provincial, municipal. We're putting a policy in place over acting or going above and beyond in terms of the provincial, but this exemption clause within the regulation allows that to be challenged. So it's very gray in terms of enforcement components, and it brings us back to the masking decision that we had 2 years ago. Additionally, what I can offer is Thames Center has put in their mandatory vaccine policy for all employees. They've gone above and beyond, as I understand, in for facilities, saying that anybody 12 and up, doesn't matter, you have to be fully vaccinated, I believe. Or is my interpretation correct?
I believe that they're going to stick to the 18 and under, but anything outside of organized sport, yes.
Yeah. Strathroy is on the fence. Middlesex Center is gearing towards one, and Southwest Middlesex is gearing towards one. So again, what we're seeking in terms of direction, encompassing some of the fringes that we have to deal with because of the regulation. Does council wish to implement a mandatory vaccine policy affecting employees, council, and volunteers? And subject to that, the level of enforcement. The rest of it, I think we can leave it open-ended in terms of a placeholder for when the dates of effect come into. But those are the two questions that I'd leave you with for some direction to staff.
Just a second. Is there anything you want to add yet?
I do want to say, with regards to security, just one further thing. One of our neighboring municipalities had someone who refused to wear a mask about a month ago, and they did not have a medical exemption and they would not leave, and they put up quite a fuss, and police actually escorted them in handcuffs. And those are the patrons who we may face at our front door, and that's why I do not want my staff to be in the line of fire for
I
them.
agree 100%. So, okay, so what we're looking for tonight is not a motion as such, but direction, right, to move forward. So go ahead.
Question for the
Councilor
mayor of
McClinchy.
London. So are we kind of doing the work of the province and of the health unit, saying that it's mandatory? Like, why is it up to the municipality to be in doing this?
Through your worship, I wish I had a full answer for that. What I can tell you, even, and I think what you're alluding towards is Dr. Mackey's Middlesex London Health Unit notice or memo about 2 weeks ago, strongly advising all municipalities, all organizations to implement a mandatory vaccine policy. In terms of the province, are we doing the legwork on their behalf? I have more questions than answers from the policy and the guidelines that were sent out the other day. But we are left with basically determining our own fate in terms of a policy. I do fear that we're putting a lot of effort into something where inevitability will come into play and the province is going to push down. But I think they want some, lack of better terms, dominoes to fall so that it makes it easier to manage. Not casting blame, but there is a lot here that a union would gravitate towards in challenging. And we have to tread very lightly here. That's all I can really say.
Councilor Moyer.
Yeah, Brett, I'm just wondering, have you talked to other arena managers? I'm just wondering if we can get a program that sort of fits so that, you know, Glencoe is not coming in here and their rules are different than ours. And then running into some issues that way, if they could all be sort of similar.
So that we had a discussion today, and that was around the security, and we're going to try and get signage that's very close to one another so that patrons know whether they're entering here, Lucan, Ilderton, Strathroy. They know that they're going to have to bring their proof of vaccination paper as well as one of these identifying documents. And it will be standard where they're greeted at any of these arenas by a security guard who is looking for these pieces, and then they will be granted access. And we will remain consistent across the board. I am going to sit in on a Zoom call with Lambton Shores and a few other municipalities in Lambton County on Friday and let them know what we as Middlesex Center are doing, and then try and stay consistent that side too.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Counselor Hemming.
I believe there is a form that is set by the ministry. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a statement of conscience. I don't know, is anybody aware of that?
Through your worship, I'm aware of similar forms, but the policy or the regulation and the guidelines are quite clear that an exemption in this instance must be, the clarification of how far we go down the rabbit hole is tricky. I think that you're getting at the exemptions components. We have to make sure that it is signed by a doctor or a registered practitioner nurse, that it is on formal letterhead, and that the names match to an ID. I can tell you wholeheartedly, I do not like being put in that position because I feel like that is the discretion of others and we don't have the authority to do that, but that is clear in the regulation that we have to do that. To Councillor Moyer's point, it just kind of dawned on me, and it's something that it also kind of rubs me the wrong way. This regulation update has come out before the QR code system, which is due next month. So we're dealing with not even I would say even one bullet in the chamber here. We're dealing with just being downloaded with an issue. But it's kind of alludes to how hastily this was pushed in. But to answer your question, there's clear guidelines on how we determine an exemption.
You follow up, Andy? Follow up?
Yeah, because I myself, I will fight.
I'm sorry, I missed it. You're opposed to it? Okay, Brandon, you have something you want
And
to add?
just to John's point with the exemption, in the last 2 months, a neighboring municipality, I won't say which one, had 3 forged documents of doctor's notes, and they were quite clearly forged. And what you're going to start seeing is that's fraud, right? So you're going to start seeing harsher penalties on that as well. And then it puts the municipality in a tough spot if they're the ones who are viewing that.
I will note that it is clear that we are not to retain this information. We are simply just to see it, make sure that it's authorized and authentic. And I have questions on that last part, but we cannot retain people's information.
Deputy Mayor Cornell.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I'm in favor of being consistent with our neighboring municipalities. I believe that we need to develop a policy that's uniform with our neighbors. I think it's beneficial to people who are traveling throughout the county, attending various events and festivities and whatnot, and sports events, that they know what to expect when they arrive at that facility, and that it's consistent across the board. So I would certainly support something along the line that complements our neighbors.
Through your worship, in Thames Center's situation, they went above and beyond in their facilities, but we do have clear direction in terms of, clear, what we'll call it for the time being. There is direction on how we manage facilities in this regulations. I think that's fair to say, Brandon, that might have been the only real direction we got.
Yes, in terms of facilities, it is very clear. There are a few things, like I said, about volunteers and whether they're a volunteer today or spectator tomorrow, but for the most part, it's pretty clear. Anyone entering the facility is a patron over the age of 18, mandatory vaccination.
But I believe, to your point, Deputy Mayor Corneliuson, is the consistency throughout, because on one hand, we can't be doing something else and not applying the same logic to the other. So that's where our seeking direction tonight is valuable.
Well, and minor hockey has already set the guidelines, so any minor hockey we have must have that, right?
Well, that's the interesting thing about the OMHA saying that they're revising their policy now, is they may try and match this more, which would lessen what they currently have.
Okay, so, but I mean, that's there, whenever minor hockey's on, it's gonna be under those guidelines.
Yes.
Yeah, and hopefully they're consistent.
Yep, and
They need to be consistent.
any sport that goes on will be under these guidelines,
Okay,
unless it's a sport league of adults, such as our men's league. But
all right. So we've talked about that, the facilities part of it, but the other whole part of this is about the staff and council, and full-time staff, part-time staff, contract, volunteer firemen. I mean, it goes on and on.
if I, again, going to just keep interjecting and adding some of what I've gathered to date, contractors and people that we retain service of is rather easy to deal with if a policy is put in place. We have the authority to do that. We have a pretty good foot to stand on onboarding a new employee, ensuring that they're vaccinated if we put in that policy. The question becomes is the existing staff that we have in place in their privacy and their vaccination status. Furthermore, the volunteer firefighters are an interesting discussion as well, and it will put a schism between some groups, including ours, that I don't know what the outcome would be, if they would resign or what they would voluntarily get vaccine. So that's the push, and I think that's what the province is suggesting, is that this is another tool in our arsenal, not well defined, but if you put in this policy, we'll see more people get vaccinated.
So one comment I would make that we had two people come to the pop-up clinic in Elsa Craig, the last pop-up clinic, and she works at St. Joe's Hospital. And she wasn't vaccinated. She said it wasn't really anti-vax, but I wasn't vaccinated. And they found out that by email, I believe it was, that if they don't get vaccinated, they had to do these tests, the rapid tests, at their cost, and the cost was $450 a month, and it came off their payroll. So she came and got her vaccine. Now, so I'm just saying that's how that place handled it, is what I'm told. And so it's really, and I know another facility where you had to do the same thing, and they refused, and actually some people were let go because they refused it. They went down that rabbit hole. They just said, I'm not telling them. So I guess staff needs to know where council's at with this. Again, not a motion, but direction. That's why it's a great night to have a discussion. It's a short agenda, and so have good discussion.
Well, I guess
Deputy Mayor.
my question would come to, if we put in a policy recommendation, but we're going to have individuals, staff, even council members that are opposed to a vaccine. How are you going to deal with that? Well, what are the alternatives?
Through your worship, that really comes down to the enforcement. There's other components about organizations that have chosen education and testing. And then as far as termination, so that's a sliding scale that if I do believe that we're going to be entering into this arrangement, that we need to kind of present even those options, although they may seem extreme. We want to have a wholesome discussion from each side of the gamut here. So whether it's just education and that's enough to say for the organization we're comfortable with, or whether it's termination. And I think that's something that needs to be brought up for full discussion.
Termination sounds a little extreme, I think.
I would agree with you on that, but I'm just giving you what I've heard from other organizations that are willing to take that approach. I would question the legality of that, how, if they're going to be with cause or without cause, or is it a lack of a better term, of forced resignment because of just dragging this out. But again, I don't know.
I suppose there's always the option for an unpaid suspension, I suppose, right?
That could be an alternative as well, but how long does that last?
Councillor Moyer.
Yeah, I think as council, I think we have a responsibility to protect the staff as well. So I believe you either need to be vaccinated or do regular testing. I think, if you don't want to get vaccinated, I think there is the testing option, and that's just a proof that they're free from the disease.
Okay, Councillor Nicol.
I agree with that statement. I think education is also a very large component of that. I don't think you can just say to somebody, we need to test you all the time. I think that we need to do an educational component, whether it's through the health unit, through a doctor. I'm not sure where that education would come from at this point, but I think that's also a very large component of it. I do feel that we are responsible for keeping North Middlesex safe, or as safe as we possibly can. I realize that when you go to union, you might have some kickback. Although from what I've read, most unions are going, yes, please, no problem. Certainly if you look at the university, they let a 20-year-old professor go. More extreme, right? Refused a mask, refused testing, refused a needle. So vaccination. So, that was more extreme. I'm hoping we would never get into that particular case here. But I think those things need to be spelled out in anything we look at, not just a vaccine, but masking, testing, and education.
I would assume that that would be paid by the employer or the employee, or the employee, I should say.
I believe that the testing should be not paid for by the employee if they refuse. As
The employee, did you say? The
the employee should pay
Okay.
for their testing if they refuse.
Okay.
Okay, that was part of my question, about being paid, who was going to pay. The other part is, in order to get tested, it's my understanding that you have to have some of these symptoms before they'll test you. It's getting more difficult that way.
So
You gotta have,
through your worship, I completely agree with you. We're going to see a shortage, maybe, maybe not, in terms of the availability of being tested, of even vaccinated, and the materials used for that. Generally, it seems to be twice or 3 times a week that employees have to be tested in order for them to be valid to go to work. More often than not, it is the rapid test, like I said, because you don't want to be waiting 2-3 days just to come back to go get tested for another day. So they want to be able to walk in the day of and come to work. And I think that only takes about half an hour or 45 minutes.
Okay, other questions? Councilor Keo, did you have your hand up?
I did, but it was, I think we kind of covered it. Who is on the hook for the cost of this rapid testing and whatnot? So anyhow, I think I understand that these are, as everyone does, these are uncharted waters, but we need to clearly make some type of decision and let the cards fall where they may.
Okay, so I guess a question I would have that I would like to find out from other municipalities as well is what they are doing with their volunteer fire departments. Are they, I won't say exempt, but is there anything different there? Or you're talking a lot of rapid tests. If I don't know how many people we're talking about, say that we have 10 firefighters as an example. I don't want to pick on them. That's not what I mean, but they're volunteers. It's a little different to me. But if they have to have 2 or 3 tests a week at their expense and I'm a volunteer, I don't think I'm paying that. You know, like I'm throwing that out there to council. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, volunteer firefighters, it is a volunteer position. However, time is of the essence, so there is no time to run a rapid test to see who can make a call and who can't. So again, people that are active in the fire department should be vaccinated. I can understand, driving in separate vehicles, distancing and whatnot. However, with the amount of EMS calls that they also are associated with, they're going into houses for lift assists and whatnot. Time is of the essence. Who has time for rapid testing? It's all on who's there first. So again, I think we need to clearly define if you are not vaccinated, perhaps you shouldn't show.
I don't disagree with you, John. I'm throwing these things out here for us to have discussion on it.
And I understand that, but I just feel that I need to, as far as being on the fire committee and perhaps being related to a fireman as well, that these things are out there. And again, it's very difficult. If there was a clear decision, it would have been made at the federal level, the provincial level, and we wouldn't be going through this. But unfortunately, they are holding us ransom. We need to come up with something, and perhaps it might meet the uniformity of other municipalities around.
See,
through your worship, I've been mulling over what we do with volunteer firefighters, and there could be a couple options of holding them back, as lack of a better term, a suspension until we're clear of the vaccine, or that the rapid testing has to be done the same amount of time, same frequency, and that it's just submitted every week. And I know they don't get called all the time, but it is something that we could look into. I think, again, kind of back to what the purpose of a policy would look like, is that we want to offer as much information, full gamut. Volunteer firefighters would be off on its side, so that it doesn't muddy the waters of the employer-employee relationship. We would just identify them separately throughout, so that, or a clause at the end that says they're subject to everything above.
So I just want to let people know, if anybody's on Zoom or online, that our fire chief just came in. I want him to be a part of the conversation. He was over at practice. So Greg, we're just having this conversation on vaccine, the impacts, where council wants to see it go. And fire, the volunteer fireman came in as well. And so I think it's good that you can take a few minutes and be a part of this conversation as well. All right, thanks. So Councillor Nickel, you had your hand up. Okay, if you don't mind giving in a synopsis of what you said so that the fire chief can hear that as well, please.
Certain, Mayor Rob. So Greg, the comment that I'd made before is that not all volunteer firefighters have had their vaccines. And with the timing being of nature, who can get to the call the quickest, who is available to get to the call, that should you have a volunteer that is not vaccinated, there is no time for any type of rapid testing. And in the frequency of when that happens in a week, when they have their testing, at no time does any volunteer firefighter know when that pager is going to go off. So the comment that I was making, whether it be personal, whether it be what people think and don't want to say, but I am a firm believer that all volunteer firefighters, and I'm also moving this toward other staff members in the close proximity of who they're working with, that they do become vaccinated, because with the fire department or the volunteer firefighters, they're working hand in hand with EMS on lift assist and everything like that. That, you know, it's how fast people can get there, and they must be prepared with their vaccinations. And to discount or discredit or to put a volunteer firefighter that doesn't have their vaccines up to date, you're more or less shunning them on making a call that if rules are implemented or to mandatory vaccination, or perhaps sit out on a temporary leave until such times as it comes to a decision, whether it be from the federal level, the provincial level, that it's, you know, it's clearly defined. I hope that I have, you know, clarified or mentioned again what I had spoke about before, but I think, and I will say this for all staff, I think, and it's not my own personal conviction, but I certainly think that it is uniformity, that if everyone is vaxxed, then we can all move forward uniformly.
Okay, thank you. Greg, I don't know if I'll put you on the spot a little bit, and I won't just say for North Middlesex. If you can come up to the mic, because otherwise they can't hear it on Zoom, but not just for North Middlesex maybe, but I'll say in Middlesex County as a whole, how that will work with the rank and file. What are your thoughts and your own thoughts, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for any of the other departments.
Okay.
For our service here, with the limited number of volunteers that we have, I want to have every one of them available to us at any time, because at any given time, some of them are away at work, some of them are out of the area, not available because of family commitments. I would like to see everybody vaccinated, but I don't want to be having to make that mandatory, because I feel we will lose valuable members. We do have adequate personal protective equipment now. We continue to follow the protocols that we put in place, that if we're operating with EMS, we are masked, gowned, face shields. I feel like we are safe. We're following those protocols. there's not much more we can do. Even if everybody was vaccinated and I knew that, I would still expect that people continue to wear their masks and hand sanitize and do all of those things, because the vaccination is not 100%. So my feeling is we're going to continue to operate the way we have been until such time as this is all over.
All right, thank you. And the reason I asked, Greg, is just before, is that I want council just to be aware, like to hear from chief, and before, when we make the decision, we want to have, or not just a decision, but our input, what's going to happen, you know, to any decision that we make. So, no, I appreciate that. Appreciate it, Greg. Councillor Nickel had her hand up first, and then the
Just a question, bringing on new firefighters, would you, at that point, consider making it mandatory?
I think I'd want to get some guidance on how now we're making different requirements for different people in the same position. I honestly hadn't given it much thought.
Yeah, I'm just feeling that out, like if we could maybe look at grandfathering, and then anybody new coming in, as of this date, you will or you will not be a volunteer. Because obviously you've still got to do all the training and everything, so.
Yeah.
I am aware that Oxford County has made that a requirement for their new staff. And that was about a month ago, because they were anticipating some wins through this policy change and some of the discussion. So I am aware of that, but the County of Oxford doesn't retain volunteer firefighters. So that's a little bit of a difference between our organizations. But what I am hearing is that volunteer firefighters need to be identified separately, whatever the outcome is, or jointly in that case, in a whole holistic approach then. It's going to be an interesting policy, I can tell you that, because again, I want to give you guys the opportunity to see the whole gamut.
I don't think that there's a difference between regular staff and volunteers. I think the same rules have to apply for everyone.
okay,
That's just my opinion.
okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and then Councilor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Greg, my question for you is, and I know you alluded to the protective equipment that the firefighters are wearing. And I know that you do a number of calls to long-term care facilities. So is it standard operating procedures that they wear all the protective equipment going in there? And what is the repercussions if they don't?
Well, they don't is not an option. We have to be wearing it. And we haven't had calls to the long-term care homes in our area in quite a while, because we were only responding to vital signs absence calls. We've gone back to our pre-COVID protocol as far as the calls we will go to, but we haven't been in there very often. When we have been in there, the first person in has to go in, assess, then calls out and says, okay, bring everybody else in. They have that time while the first person is in to gown and mask and face shield, if that's what we're going to be doing. We just haven't come across it, but everybody has been very good about wearing their PPE to any of our calls.
All right, thank you. Councilor Moyer.
Yeah, I was just, maybe it's more of a legal question. And I know we call them volunteer fire department, but they are getting paid by the municipality as well. So would, by having two different sets of rules for municipal staff and volunteers, what does that do for, you know, the union and grievances? Does that open it up?
Through your worship, you are correct. Volunteers are actually considered employees of the organization. There is no difference. It's more of a corporate culture that and I think everybody's grappling with this question, is what is the correct approach individually in some of these nuances, but they are technically employees of the organization. So they would be subject to this policy if it's in place to that, unless we identify them separately. What you're going to deal with that issue is corporate culture, in differences from one service department to the next. And yes, there is somewhat of a defense in saying we lose volunteers by doing this. And that's why they're separate, but that's why we're having this discussion today.
And that's exactly right. That's why, like I said, why I brought it up. I want to have a full, wholehearted discussion on, and to get everyone's views out. Councillor Hemming. You want anything you want to add here? I know you made a comment and there's.
Yeah, no, I don't really want to get into the all discussion about it, but the thing that I'm not anti-vax. If you want to get it, you want to get it, that's fine. But I'll be darned if you're going to make me get it, because you can still have the vaccine. It's not 100%, but there's more fear that everybody's going to get it from me than I can get it just as easy from you guys that have all been vaccinated. So I don't know. And it's, you know, it's a bit of a rights thing, you know, being forced, you know, but I'm willing to go along with whatever, but you have to make some kind of concession somehow, you know, by, you know, I'm not against getting tested by any means, but I just don't agree that you should force people to get a vaccine.
That's why I asked you, Andy, because that's what we want
Yeah.
is all the opinions, all the statements.
Well, I'm a bit of a lone soldier here. I get
Well,
that.
yep. No, but that's all right. We've all been there. So no, that's good. Counselor Keough.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I guess maybe I would just like to simplify it. In this is of my own belief that the vaccination is the first step toward prevention of acquiring this ailment. But to simplify it, if you drive a car, you must have a license. If you don't drive a car, you just don't drive. And I look at this to try and simplify it. If you don't have a vaccination, then you don't work.
See, I still believe
We need
this
to
is-
make, I would like to say, the federal government doesn't want to make a decision. The provincial government doesn't want to make a decision. And until there is a decision made, we'll kick this can around, and we're going to offend people whatever way we lean. However, I think that with the vaccination, that was the first measure of prevention. That is the way we should be moving, my opinion.
And when all this is said and done, as you said, it's being dumped onto the frontline staff to get the ramifications. This Brandon's department's going to really feel this. There's no question about it, no matter how it comes out exactly. When you have to have security guards to let people enter your arena or your community centers, we've gone down the wrong direction, I believe, but this is what's in front of us. And so is there more discussion on this? And I'm sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I wanted all of the whole aspect of North Middlesex and our employees, council, everything in that. So
I just had a final comment I'd like to make, and that is that while I certainly support vaccines and encourage people to be vaccinated, I'd certainly be seriously challenged to remove someone's livelihood if they chose not to. That I would have a difficult time doing that.
Councilor Moyer.
That's where the testing comes in. We're not saying if you don't get vaccinated, you terminate, you can be tested. And so it's one or the other. That's the option that they can have, is do the testing. I mean, I have members of my family that aren't vaccinated, but they know they need to get tested if they're going to do anything.
Okay,
So it's, yeah.
Councilor Keough.
And I agree with Councillor Moyer. The point I'm trying to make is, should you be opt out of vaccination, then cost be occurred unto you because that is your decision.
From top to bottom in our organization, correct?
Absolutely.
That's what you're
Yep,
thinking?
yep. So
Okay.
if you choose not to be vaccinated, yet you are going to go the rapid testing route, any costs incurred, let that be on to you.
Okay, that's Jonathan, do you want anything you want to add?
I think that's pretty clear. I can work with that. The timeline I can give you is that although this is rapidly changing, we want to make sure it's right. I think still seek, because even though we're not identifying that we will terminate people, there is an argument there that we are forcing people to a decision about employment. I'd still like to have a legal opinion, and I know there's enough out there that I can grab one relatively quickly. Even the county legal, I know they're drafting one now anyways, or have. So we have enough, I think, policy, education, testing, That's the general synopsis of what we do from top down to the organization.
And tonight is the discussion.
Yeah, it is.
direction.
I would like to say one other thing, though. There is clear delineation between patrons, which are people that we serve. Council chambers has been identified as an area for patrons. So someone from the general public who comes to see council can still come here without being vaccinated. We can still put a policy that says they have to show us their exemption or what have you, or imply that they have to be, that they have to be vaccinated to sit in the gallery. It's a little easier out in the front area because that nice glass fishbowl keeps a clear divide. And I do strongly believe patrons are people we serve that are there less than 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and they turn away and go away. But when they come into the organization, past those doors, that's where it changes. And that's where we would be applying this logic or policy.
Councillor McClinton.
So basically, because the federal government nor the provincial government has said thou shalt vaccinate, they haven't done that. So they're kind of shoved it all onto the municipality, down our throat as to what we think is right in order to protect our staff, our employees, council members, the community, North Middlesex in general. So whether it be right or wrong, and there's going to be people that's going to oppose, or, we're doing their dirty work in a matter of saying.
Kind of like the masks.
Yeah, and besides election, the elections here, they can't begin to make any policies.
Can't really argue that, and down, just 2 months down the road, it might be all of a sudden vaccination is mandatory. Or 3 months down the road. Yeah, but, sorry? Oh. Okay, so Brandon, anything you want to add? Okay, Greg, anything?
No, sir.
Okay, so nothing else? Thanks, guys. It was a good, great discussion. We had, everyone had lots of input on it. And what I don't like about it is it isn't a right or wrong. Everybody has their opinion on it. And they have the right to their opinion. And absolutely. So, no, thank you very much. And thanks, Greg, for coming over for a little bit to do this. Okay, so moving forward, the deferred items are in front of everyone there. Communication from County Council.
Thank you, Mayor Ropp. So Mayor Ropp and I were able to attend an in-person session of County Council yesterday. That was really exhilarating and was refreshing to actually meet and be able to have the opportunity to talk to our fellow colleagues in council as well as senior staff. In the morning, we did attend an in-camera session of road safety, which was very enlightening and I think educational. We were able to get I guess the county is going towards alternating between virtual and in-person meetings beginning next month, I believe, but right now, right? We're doing that. And Mayor Ropp and I had a good discussion with the engineer on our bridges. And Mayor Ropp, I don't know, you want to share some of that information with the council?
Yes, the Narren Bridge, they're still assessing it, but they may have to lift, part of it when they fix it and stuff, but it's going to stay open for a while, but it's going to be a while yet before they decide exactly what they're going to do to fix it. The Blacks Bridge, the EA is posted for the Blacks Bridge. So there's a time frame there where it has to sit posted. But that's all done. And so that's moving forward. It's not a fast process. These EAs and EA and stuff is a slow process, but that is moving forward and going forward with that as well. We have a lot of bridges in the county that are much like the Narren Bridge, built at the same time, 1960, that type of era. And like you said, if that becomes an issue, the county's in trouble. I mean, but so they're being looked after that way. We did get a chance to meet. The other thing is that at the county right now, they're looking to do some infrastructure for cameras and stuff. Right now, we have to wear the headphones. It's not as nice, but they're doing that infrastructure and they're working on that as well there. So it was nice, a year since we've been there. So it was nice to be in person. And so it was.
I just wanted to add that because of the method in terms of hybrid meetings, we still have to have our Zoom lens on our iPad. So I actually asked for a printed copy of the agenda.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did or not, but it was
Well-
enormous.
I had my iPad there,
Okay,
and then they gave me a laptop to borrow for the, yeah,
it was a book.
yeah, it's a bit. But anyways, it was nice to be back in person at it. And I think that's the big thing. But we did get a good update on roads and some of the things. It was an in-camera session, but it was put on through Intact Insurance by their experts, so. Anything else? Any questions from the county? No? Okay, reading of the bylaws.
So
Bylaw.
bylaw 77 is your confirming bylaw for first and second reading.
First and second, Counselor Moyer, Counselor Hemming, all in favor? Carried.
And third and final.
Counselor Nickel, Counselor Keough, all in favor? Carried. No closed meeting. Move to adjourn. Counselor McClinchy, seconded by Counselor Keough, all in favor?